I'm so excited I haven't even showered today. I'm so excited. I left the plants in for shower time yesterday. Hot dilly darn, I'm so excited I haven't even turned the terrariums on yet. A paludarium is an aquarium that's got plants kind of growing out of the top of it. So in a lot of cases, and in our case today in fact, there's going to be plants that are growing under the water, but then there's also going to be plants that grow above the water on our living wall thing that we're going to construct in this video. And this time it's for real. We ain't turning around. Look how I set the room up so pretty. That's how excited I was. I wanted this video to turn out absolutely perfect. I even dragged some plants from the plant room so I could fill out the background for you. And I moved this light into that corner right there so that it would cast some beautiful rays on our project as we worked on it. Enough imagining aside, well, a little bit of imagining still, because you probably don't have quite the vision that I do. I've been thinking about this for weeks now. I got this thing on Amazon. I forget exactly what I paid for it, but it wasn't too much. I think it was in the $40, $50 range. So I got these red and black lava rocks from a place called Arizona Lava Rocks on Etsy. So they live in a place in the world where I guess they can go out and just sort of find these things naturally. And they do that, they document them, they take all sorts of pictures, they put all sorts of effort into displaying these things. And I bought this rock, I think it was like $15 or so. I told them I was making a paludarium project with it, and you know, they also sent me, I didn't realize it at the time that I'd need a lot more, but they somehow knew that I'd need more because they sent me all the rest of these just along with it as sort of a bonus gift. And I just thought that was, I don't know, it makes it worth actually mentioning that I got this from Arizona Lava Rocks on Etsy, I think. I don't tell you guys where I actually get stuff in hopes that you'll go out and support them and tell them I told you, and they'll start sending me all sorts of free stuff and things like that. I tell you guys where I get things simply because I want to sort of, you know, uncover the mystery sometimes. You know, all of this stuff, I got all of my tubes and fitting and pump and everything like that on Amazon. I got the actual tank here on Amazon. I got the lava rock from Arizona Lava Rocks on Etsy. I even got the plants and the fish that we saw earlier from a local fish store called the Fish Room. But the point is that everything, all of the ingredients for this project, it's a culmination of all sorts of different things. And I tell you where I got stuff to sort of point you in the right direction. My intention is always to kind of give you an idea of what you need, and then you know, you can go out and do the hard work for yourself. Trust me, it's not easy going and picking through hundreds of products and trying to, you know, figure out which one is the best, and then realizing that different things are different colors. So, you know, now you want black tubing and black fittings, and that changes everything. You can handle all that. That's the fun part. You can do all that sort of stuff yourself. I wanna get you there. So a culmination of ingredients from all over the place. Living plants that go above the water, living plants and living animals, living fish that are gonna go below the water here. Rocks from Arizona, from across the country, almost I think exactly across the country from me in North Carolina here. Stuff from small businesses, stuff from big companies. That's what's amazing about all this. It's taking all of these pieces and putting them together that I feel like that's the reason we're alive, or at least that's the reason that I'm alive. So unlike my last terrarium that I made where you could view it from all different angles, this paludarium is meant to be viewed from the front. And then that gives us the opportunity to sort of store our pump and everything that we need. All the ugly stuff, all the cords and everything are going to be able to be hidden right behind this giant living rock of lava rocks that we're going to create. So that little chunk right here, the idea is going to be that this sort of creates a living wall full of little cracks, little crevices. Pause the project. I forgot one super important thing. I forgot to introduce the plants that are actually going to be living above the water in this paludarium. I saw these little Peperomia bamboo stalks online. I love the look of them. I had to have them. As soon as I got them, I had to come up with a project. If anything inspired this living wall paludarium that we're about to build, it's these little Peperomia bamboo stalks. I just think they're the most adorable, awesome looking plant. And we'll probably use a little bit of our creeping fig or our Ficus pumila just to add a little bit of that kind of viney look and stuff all over the place. And we're going to use a bunch of sphagnum moss to kind of fill in all the cracks and crevices, and you'll see what all this stuff comes in useful for. I've got 3 tiny little fish that you're probably not going to be able to see in here. They're called chili rasboras, and no living wall of any sort would ever be complete without some fancy moss. So we're just going to use, you know, as much of this sheet moss as we need. We're going to turn this chunk, this back corner of the paludarium, we're going to turn it into a living wall. And not only is it going to be a living wall covered in mosses and our little bamboo stalks back there, but we're going to bring water up from the terrarium that the fish are going to be putting all of their waste and things like that into it. We're going to bring a tube up over the back of this rock wall here. We're going to split it off so we can kind of send water down in all different directions. We're going to have water that kind of shoots down, going all over the roots of the plants, kind of supplying everything that's living up on these rocks with its food. And we're going to have ourselves a darn good little micro universe. And that's why I was so excited at the beginning of this video. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to acknowledge that the first step is always difficult. We're going to take our epoxy cement, our Flourish epoxy out. I just got this at that local fish store, the fish room that I was talking about earlier. Welcome to the table. Was that a good transition? So before we actually start cementing these things together and doing all that, we need to decide how we're going to lay this out. I've got them thrown in here, and I'm sort of liking what we've got going already. But let's kind of arrange these things just perfectly so. Actually, it always kind of blows my mind how just, standing up from your chair sometimes will give you such a different viewpoint. It's one of the things that I've really kind of learned about in life is clearing your mind and coming at things with a fresh perspective is advice that anyone can live with, or anyone can live by at any time in their life. Or at least that's what I've learned about life. You take your puzzle pieces, you wiggle them around, they don't fit together perfectly, but eventually something magical happens, and for some reason it always works out where you end up with maybe it's the human brain, maybe it's our human ingenuity that just is always able to take what we've got and to turn it into something that looks natural and organic, but also natural and organic on purpose. There's all sorts of different ways that you can connect your rocks together though. You can use this epoxy putty. You can use silicone. You can use zip ties. Sometimes, you don't even have to epoxy everything together. But again, I'm sticking it all together because I want to be able to lift this whole thing out of the paludarium and be able to maintain things as we go. You want to be, generous enough with this stuff so that it can, when you shove it onto the other piece, of course, it can stick. Can you see this sticking? All right, okay. And then you basically just leave it there and hope it hardens and doesn't break off. You do your best job to get the putty in each of the little crevices. And you go one by one to all the different contact points on your rocks. You keep mashing up some more putty. You might even talk about what it smells like. It has, I don't want to go because it's not a good smell. It's chemically, and it smells a little bit like sewer water mixed with hay. If you were at a farm and the sewer was backing up and there was a bunch of hay around and it was getting all in the hay. That's what I feel like that room would smell like, or this is what I feel like. This is what that smells like. But what I'm also going to do is get a little bit of my putty, and I'm going to get in here and just kind of squeeze some in. You're going to need a little bit more putty than you think. I used about 3/4 of that stick, and I'm not quite done. We've still got the top rock. Smash it up with your hands even. Roll it up. Just give it a good old knead. This is our glue. This is what's going to be bonding all of our rocks together. Everywhere that this putty goes into is going to it's going to harden. And then when all is said and done, when you finally got everything in place and it's all sort of holding, go around to some of those main areas, some of those bigger areas, and do just a little bit of epoxying or a little bit of filling in on the edges, on the cracks, just to give a little bit more of that support. So I'm gonna let this sit like this for just a little bit, let that epoxy kind of work its way into those little pores and do what it does. Once we're done waiting, we're gonna turn this thing around and we're gonna be working right down in here. And we'll see you on the next one, Jimmy. In the meantime, let's check up on our little fishies, our little chili rasboras down in here. So we got 1, 2 I see, swimming around. Where's the third one? Where you at, buddy? 3. Don't worry guys, we're almost done. I'm working on the living wall portion. Well, we're working on the plumbing portion that's going to put the water that will create the living wall portion. And then it'll be almost time to put you guys in your new home. And we're back. Done everything but take a sip of water. And now we're ready to go. We're ready to move on to the plumbing portion of our tank here. So as I mentioned before, I've got our little fittings sort of already put together, so you didn't have to watch me shove these onto the barbs. But basically what this is this came with the pump. It fits right into the top here. So that's how that works. And then I had to use this larger airline tubing to fit over that piece into our little barb here, which then comes down to our little, it's actually an airline tube, but we're going to be using this as a water tube. We're going to bring this little tube up off of the pump, and then near the top, we're going to split it so that we've got 2 different hoses and we've got water coming from 2 different directions. Now another question that you might be asking yourself is, what about the filter? Don't we need to have some sort of a filter in here? Especially because we're going to have the little fish swimming around. Yeah, they're tiny little chili rasboras, but you know, aren't they still going to be kind of polluting the water? Well, this living wall right here, this is the idea of this whole paludarium. This living wall is going to actually act as our filter, and all the plants and the mosses and everything that's living on this thing, as the water makes its way up and over and then back down this wall into the aquarium portion, that's where the filter is. All of those plants, they're going to be sucking all of the nasties. That's the beauty of this symbiotic relationship. That's the beauty of nature, is that, you know, one thing's waste is another thing's food, is another thing's, you know, who knows what. I'm sitting here building a frickin' paludarium from pieces all over the world, and I've somehow come up with language to call it a paludarium. Anyways, moving right along. So this is our back portion of the tank. Let's put our little pump fitting right in here, and then a little drop down right into the back there. Will be good. Now there's one other thing that we need to put on this hose before we move any further, and that is this little doodad right here. And what this is it's basically this little knob right here can open and close this little valve. So we're going to add this right onto the tube as we come off the pump right here. And what that's going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to adjust the flow of the water that's coming out of the pump. And this is super important. This is a super important piece, because if you can't adjust the flow and your pump is too strong, it's going to be pushing water all over the place. And we want to be able to have that fine control when we actually get this thing all set up. Yep. It helps if you make the noises when you're shoving these things on. Now we've got us a little nozzle that we can regulate the water flow coming out of this itty bitty titty pump. And now we're going to use one of these little Y fittings, right like that. We're going to stick this in here, and now with our extra remaining piece, we're going to cut this into 2, right in half for now. Stick it on the other ends of this Y right here. So now we've got our pump, our thing that reduces the actual hose that we need to fit on top of the pump into our airline tubing here. Got our little regulation valve. Got a little bit of more space there. Comes into a Y, and now we've got our rabbit ears, or our double hose system. And now we can point water in 2 different directions to just give us more variability as far as where the water is going to flow down here. But hold the phone. I sat, I looked, I debated, and I think what I've actually decided to do is remove this one valve right here, our little control valve. I'm going to take this out, I'm going to shorten this pipe up, and I'm going to add one of these valves to either end of these rabbit ears here. I'll make that quick little adjustment. I'll move you back to the table, and plumbing adjusted. New control valves coming off of each of the different sides of the hose here. Drop our pump back in. I think it's finally time to put our aqua soil, our substrate, down on the bottom layer of this paludarium. So this stuff, well, that's called aqua soil. It has no discernible scent, and it's going to look awesome on the bottom of our paludarium. Get in here, smoosh this around. Similar to when we were putting the rocks together, now we're just wiggling the ground. Don't want to cover up too much of our base. But we do want, let's see, got maybe 1.5 inches. We could probably do with a little bit less of this substrate. And I know this is the perfect build because I get to use all of my cute little tools. I don't even know if I've ever used this little tiny shovel. I finally found a reason. So there's our Paludarium with its substrate layer in. About 1 inch or so, which should be perfect. Everything's looking like it's coming together nice. Pretty soon we're going to be putting the actual water in this thing. We're going to be testing the pump out. We're going to be getting the water flow coming down off these rocks. And then we're going to be on that final step of actually putting the living things from over here all over our wall and turn what is right now just a regular old boring Paludarium into a living rock wall Paludarium. I think a gnat flew in my throat. Ugh. Anyways, so the one last thing that we're going to have to do before we actually start putting water in this thing and testing out the pump, getting that living rock wall built, is we're going to put some of our Monte Carlo. This is our underwater plant, Monte Carlo, or for all you scientists, Micranthemum tweedii. Micranthemum tweedii. I don't know what it is. It's called Monte Carlo for short. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Whenever I'm doing any sort of design, aquascaping, gardening, anything like that, I always like to work in odd numbers. So 1, 3, 5, something like that. And in this case, we chose 3 of our little underwater plants here. You can see all the little roots and everything in there, right? And we've got us there fresh and ready to be put in the ground. Little Monte Carlo plant. It's gonna be you, buddy. You won the prize, you get to be first. So we're gonna get this buried nice and deep. Some of that soil down in there. Spread some of this out. Basically everywhere this plant touches is going to start putting roots down. It's going to start grabbing onto the soil. We mostly just want to kind of kick-start it and give it a good shot. And now, by golly, folks, I think we've done it. I think we've reached that second milestone, the most important milestone of the whole build, if you will. And that's going to be when we actually put water into this Paludarium. To be honest with you, I should have tested that this rimless tank even worked. I didn't even test to make sure there was no leaks. It's going to be that much of a surprise for the two of us. But yeah, the time is now. Welcome to the Paludarium. You have first sprinkle of water. You want to get out too? Lettuce? Oh. I'm going to be doing that over and over again. Dipping my cup into the bucket here. Making sure I didn't catch any fish or anything until it's actually time. And slowly filling our Paludarium up. And that's a little pro tip that I should leave you with before I finish getting this thing filled up. Don't when you go to your hardware store, don't buy the branded bucket. I don't know why anyone pays for a bucket to advertise someone else anyways. And get you one of these buckets. Not only is it unbranded, but it's got these awesome measuring things on the side of it. So it's basically like a big old giant measuring cup. And I find it comes in useful for almost every project I do. I realized just as it was getting wet that I didn't do anything to hide that little piece of putty right there. So instead of using a moss or something like that to cover that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this plant right here so that this plant I can have grow in over top of that rock. And we'll use it as sort of a natural cover. The good news is that we caught it ahead of time, and I'm also going to share another pro tip with you on how I'm going to cover up this ugly white epoxy putty that we used to seal our entire living rock wall together. For this, we're going to use some crushed up aqua soil, just like we used on the surface. And then the second part of this process is going to be black aquarium silicone. So let's put a little bit of a dab right in the middle of our plate here. Give it one good squeeze. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger. I'm going to get us a nice little glob like that. I'm going to get on top of here. I'm going to cover it. I'm going to give a nice little layer on top of all the uglies. Can you see where this is going yet? And don't forget, we're also going to have moss and all sorts of plants and stuff growing on this too. Again, a little bit of black silicone, a little bit of crushed up whatever you want. Plop it over top of your, make a bit of a mess, plop it over top of your ugly seams in there. And that's how you do a professional job. And just for those extra hard to reach places, you can always grab like a paintbrush or something like that. Get right back in there. One guy on YouTube that inspires me a lot that I'm sure you've heard of is called Serpa Design, and he actually uses this technique with the black silicone and some peat moss or whatever it is, and some twine, and makes little vines and all sorts of cool things like this. So this little technique can come in handy in a number of different ways. But what we were using it for is all finished up now, and we can finally get back. I almost forgot what I was doing, but I can finally get back to scooping water and filling this thing up. It actually wouldn't be a bad time to start catching some of our little fishies in here. Let's see if we can actually get them. Might have to get some of this lettuce out of here. See them? 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's see if we can get you guys. Now I finally got one. Can you see him yet? Well, it's going to be our first little inhabitant. So let's pour him in and maybe I'll give you a good look from the side. I didn't see him go in. Did you see him go in? And there we go. Cheers. Just kidding. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink the fish. I don't know if you noticed this, but I also bought these fish in 3s. And I think with that last dump, I think we're finally about full as well. I don't know if maybe we could come up a little bit higher, but I think, I think I'm pretty happy with the water level right there. And now it's time for the moment of truth. Now is when we actually flip the water on. We know the pump works. I've tested the pump, but we don't know how it's going to go from here. Okay, so it seems to be working okay. Down in the test bucket here. A little dribble should be enough. We might even close it up a little bit. You probably can't even see it at this point, but there's definitely some good water flow dripping down there, and you'll definitely be able to notice it when we get all the moss and everything on there. Did you forget about the Bamboo Peperomia that we were so excited about in the beginning of this video? Before we actually get onto that step though, we do have to come up with some sort of a way of attaching these onto the rock here. And that's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to zip tie these to the rocks, and then we're going to use our moss and all of our rest of our things to actually cover this up. My line through, maybe a little bit more so we can pull it out the back. There we go. Did I say zip tie? I meant to say twist tie, because that's what I'm doing. Now I'm twisting it up. Okay. So you can see I've got our one little rock thing, or one little spout in place. Ta-da! Got everything all zipped into place. A little bit ugly with the green on there, but that's okay. That's okay because we're moving on to the next step. The final step, in fact. The fact that we've been waiting for the whole time. The reason that we're actually building this thing. It's finally time to start adding life. It's finally time to start turning this thing from an aquarium into a paludarium. But before we get to that step, before the last step, there's always a step before the last step. And this time it's actually just something I want to show you. Now that we've got everything hooked up, our flow is actually working quite a bit better. I can even get that thing spitting down. So I don't know what the deal before was, but I just wanted to point out that that's working even better now too. So I've got everything running. So before we actually get to our Bamboo Peperomias here and all of that sort of stuff, we're going to start with some good old tried and true. It's just dry sphagnum moss that's been saturating in this water for a bit. And what we're going to use this for is, think of this as the mortar in between the bricks. But mostly, I just want to take some of this sphagnum moss and start filling in all of those little extra cracks, all those little extra bits. I'm not going to use this as kind of our showy moss, but what this is going to be for is it's going to be more for hiding things, fitting in behind this zip ties that I had to use here, kind of covering up on top of the water that's spouting out. You know, see how easy it is? So I just kind of shove some moss into the cracks, and before you know it, all your dirty little secrets of how you held it all together are nicely covered up. I think it's finally time to work with our little inspirational bamboo plants. You want to clean all these roots off. We want to have everything as nice and fresh as possible. And usually it's not a big deal, but on our living wall here, we don't want any of this dirty above ground dirt. In fact, I'm even going to give these roots a good little spritzing, a good washing off. And again, the roots of these plants, they're not only going to grow in this sphagnum moss, but they're going to love every cotton flipping minute of growing in this sphagnum moss. Just a tiny little pinch of life. I knew, that's why I wanted to use these little bamboo stalks, because I knew they would add just a subtle little hint. Get a little bit more sphagnum moss right in the back here. Oops. See? That's what I like about my fingers. They always do what I'm thinking, not as I'm doing. It's the time to introduce the OG, the living rock wall original, and that's our sheet moss right here. So we're just going to find a bunch of nice little areas. Our sphagnum moss was sort of the mortar in between the bricks, the one that we're kind of, you know, wanting to shove into all the little cracks and gullies to hide it off. This is the one that we actually want to present to the viewer that's looking at our paludarium. So we're going to use this to cover up all of those places that we don't like. See how we've got just a little peak of that rock sticking up there? Well, that's what we're going for. That's the idea with this moss, to kind of fill in all of the places that nobody really cares to look with something delightful to the eye, but then still leaving this beautiful rock kind of peeking out just in all the right places. It's almost like a new outfit for this lava rock. I just wanted to feel like this rock is like it's alive, it's breathing, and it's sweating little juices out over top of its mossy outfit. And one of the best things about these vining plants is that anywhere that is exposed to moistness, moss, soil, anything like that, anywhere on this little branch that you're seeing that's exposed is going to start shooting out little roots. I think we're going to come in like this so that eventually when this vine grows out, it'll grow all the way down that little ledge, or at least that's the plan, Stan. And guess what? Special alert. I don't have time to grab the camera and show you. Well, maybe I do. Let's see if we can see them. I found all 3 fish. I officially saw them all at once. Got one right there. Got one right there. And then we come around back here is where I saw him last. He's still in there? Oh, there he is, over by the pump. Can you see him? Anyways, before we were interrupted there, I was simply putting this little vine of ficus into place. We've got our little Bamboo Peperomia plants kind of hanging down here near the water. I'm really excited to see what happens with these things. To be honest with you, I would like to have another one of these kind of attached to the back somewhere that's sticking up a little bit further. But for now, I just sort of want to keep my eye on these things. I want to specifically see how they actually grow in the water like this. I want to see how they take to this environment. And you know, there's always room to add something later. That's the best part about a paludarium, is you're never quite done. And just when you think you're done, a new idea pops in your head, you decide to rip it all apart and start again fresh. But we're not starting fresh today, because my friends, we've got us a fresh paludarium. Take a look at that thing. Take a look at these 3 amigos hanging up in the front. Can you see them finally all at once? If I was a fish, I would enjoy living under that surface. But you know what? We're doing all this admiring, and we haven't even turned the flippin' water on. We haven't even really seen this thing in action. So right off the bat, we don't notice too much, but guys, that's why we got our little flow nozzles here. Get a little bit more flow. Do you see those little drips starting to happen right down there? That was the idea, is that get this thing nice and saturated, and then start to see all sorts of little drips and things like that happening. And even that's not all. I got one more thing, one more way of making this paludarium behind me, our living rock wall paludarium that's just, it's dripping with life behind me as I speak. I've got one more way of making this thing really stand out. There we go. Got some different brightness levels. We're going to take it down right to about there. Not only what's above the surface, but the thing about this paludarium is what's below the surface as well. We've got a little fishy swimming back there. So how should we end this video? What should we do? Should we find a plant to kind of fill in that space back there? Maybe something like this striped Thersena over here would work well. But we finally done it, and we done it together. We took ingredients from all over the world. We organized all of that into one cohesive, but still natural and organic looking, tiny little pico universe back here. And what do we have to show for it? Well, take a good look. The fish down there seem to be enjoying it. And up on top, we've got us our first living rock wall paludarium. I'm not even sure what angle to get for you guys. This is definitely the bad side where you can see a little bit of the tubes. Hold on, I've got a fire alarm going off. But it seems to be just a test. Hold on. Sorry for interrupting your paludarium viewing. Actually, one more little adjustment. I don't necessarily want that plant there. I think instead we're going to take our foxtail fern and put that one right down in front, just to add a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of something different in there. It's not just the finished piece. It's not just this tiny little pico universe that we created together. It's the entire ensemble. It's the way your entire eye kind of sees everything. It also wants to focus on that little sparkle of magic right in the middle there. By the way, every time I'm editing my videos now, well, it takes a little look to the left to see our living rock wall paludarium right beside me. I can't wait to see what kind of inspiration this thing gives me. What kind of inspiration is it going to give you, Cadence? What do you think? Did you see the fishies? You saw some fishies in there? Oh, okay. What are you doing? Playing with your baby? You don't brush your teeth with that. Ew, I clean nasty things with that. Don't brush your teeth with that. Okay. It's really early in the morning. I wanted to give you a bit of an update. I made just a few changes on the paludarium in the past week or so, and we're going to get the sad one over with first. First, one of our three amigos, one of the fish, it didn't make it through, I think it was the first night that one of the three amigos died. The good news is, and here's, of course there's good news. The good news is over the past week, the other two have been thriving. They're scouring around all over the tank. They're eating really well. They're doing everything like that. I've even got a couple more live inhabitants in this paludarium. I've got a fancy guppy right up here in the front saying hello to us. So that's not the biggest inhabitant. Let's see if we can find one of the, oh, there's one of the little fish back in there. Do you see that? I apologize if this footage is dark. Again, it's really early in the morning. I don't have really any lights on. I'm working on editing this paludarium video in the back, and I had to grab the camera and record this final little update video because I have made some changes. Now, the biggest change that I actually made to the aesthetic of this paludarium is a big one. So we used to have these little bamboo things sticking right in the front here, and the 3 different Bamboo Peperomias being all stuffed in the front here. Not only was it sort of an imbalance of the plants, and I kind of felt like all of the life, especially with all of the floating things up in here, and then having all of the little bamboo plants, kind of stuffed up in the front, it was a little bit out of balance. I opened up all of this detail with that little cave, and you can even see I've got a little bit more of the strap to hide, but you can even see more of the drips and the drop. But in order to clear up that little cave, I had to move again this little Peperomia bamboo stalks, and I did something cool with it. If you haven't seen my kokedama video from, I don't know, weeks and weeks ago, go back and watch that one. But I basically turned these things into a tiny little kokedama. Slide this little guy out of here. I kind of did something really neat with this. So I took the roots, I wrapped them in sphagnum moss, Wrapped them in twine, just like you make a kokedama, except I didn't do the whole thing with all of the, cheesecloth and all that kind of stuff. But I made a tiny little kokedama so that I could kind of shove it back in here. And what I'm actually going to do is, instead of being attached to the rock at all, the bottom of that tiny little kokedama is just resting on the surface of the water here. So it's doing its job soaking up the water and filling those roots with nutrients and everything like that, just like the rest of the plants on this rock are doing. So I opened everything up. I balanced up the plants a little bit. I opened up this beautiful little cave thing that we got going in here. Just a lot of detail on this rock. Sort of made the flow work a little bit better. Everything's coming to life. Let me flip you around, give you another little browse right around the Paludarium to say goodbye. Under the desk, right from its natural, right in its natural habitat, this living stone Paludarium. And if I'm being honest, the best thing about an aquarium, the thing that I missed most about an aquarium, is just being able to sit down here. Because this Paludarium's low to the ground, I can even kind of just lay on my arms and just stare into a little world that's going on under the surface. And overall, we get to be the observers. Yeah, the observers of a living stone Paludarium universe. That's a good way to end this one.